Thank you.
Hello,
Hi, Jonathan.
how are y'all?
Great. It's good to see you.
I'm wearing over here the Credible Messenger shirt.
Nice.
Yeah, I did the logo, so it's pretty
One.
exciting.
Hi, Jeremy. Good to see you.
Hey, good to see y'all.
Hi, Tenzin. I see you out there.
Hey, hey. I said hello several times. I guess you guys didn't hear me.
We did not hear you, Miss Tammy.
Oh, that's all right. Glad to see you all.
See you.
Good to see
see you.
you. There's Tenzin. Hi, Tenzin.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
We're just helping Dr. Tanksley troubleshoot the link. They're having some trouble logging on, but they should be with us shortly.
Oh, no. Chesley, in the meantime, I'm looking forward to my one-on-one meeting with you. Just shoot me a couple of days that you are available so I can clear my calendar to meet with you on one of those days.
Okay, sounds good. I'll do that. I'll do that tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, I just wanted to say, I don't know if, because I had to leave our meeting early last time, I don't know if anybody brought this up, but I just wanted to give a shout out to Tammy because I was in the event at TSU that you invited me to. And yeah, thank you for being there and speaking truth to power there, because there was a whole bunch of them in there that were like, but how do we get people to trust the police? But how do we get them to see the police as safe? And you were just there like, hello, can we acknowledge all of the history?
Right. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan.
Jeremy, yeah, but yeah, you're welcome.
I'm sorry.
No
Please.
problem.
And
Yeah.
hello and welcome to everyone else that's joining us.
Yeah, Jeremy, I sent you an email too. I need you to work with me on this upcoming event on the 26th.
Okay, dope. Would love to. I'll have to see if I have room in my calendar.
All right, thank you. And getting some parents out there.
That sounds good. I like to see the collaboration already.
Oh, MJ, I'm going to get back with you too. I've been running, forgive me, in reference to your colleague
Yes.
there.
Thank you.
Yes, I will be getting back with you.
Appreciate you. And I also just want to keep on welcoming everybody coming into this space with us this evening. We have a really great kicking off to the series. So we're gonna just give another minute, right, Chelsea? And you can do the
I
introduction.
think we've got Dr. Tanksley here and a great critical mass.
Very good.
So we might be able to start. Let's just make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, where we're going. Maybe we can just make sure that Dr. Tanksley is able to share her slides. Do you mind just confirming if you've got that option on your Zoom window?
I do see that.
Great. Then I think let's go ahead and kick it off. We still got some people coming in. But I just would like to say welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, afternoon. This is the Ending Youth Surveillance Seminar, a speaker series that's sponsored by the No Tech Criminalization and Education Coalition, as well as the Edgelands Institute. This series is part of the programming for the No Data About Us Without Us Fellowship, which is a national program that's supporting directly impacted community members from historically marginalized and directly impacted communities, including parents, students, and teachers, with the knowledge, skills, and resources that are necessary to launch local campaigns at the intersection of tech and youth justice. So this is one of our more public-facing events that includes both fellows, which is an amazing cohort of people, many of whom are here today, as well as our broader community of people who we're in conversation with and whose work we admire. So we're really excited to have y'all here today. And we're really excited to have Dr. Tanksley with us to kick this off as our inaugural speaker. I'm going to pass it over to Clarence to do a little bit of an introduction of her and her work.
Cool. Good evening, everybody. So I have the honor of introducing Dr. Tiara Tanksley. So Professor Tanksley is currently a faculty fellow in critical race and technology studies at the UCLA Center on Critical Internet Inquiry. Her scholarship theorizes a critical race theory in education and extends conventional education research to include socio-technical and techno-structural analyses of artificially intelligent technologies. Specifically, she examines how anti-Blackness functions as a default setting for AI and examines the socio-emotional, mental health, and educational consequences of algorithmic racism in the lives and schooling experiences of Black youth. Her work simultaneously recognizes Black youth as digital activists and civic agitators and examines the complex ways that they subvert, resist, and rewrite racially biased technologies to produce more just and joyous digital experiences for communities of color across the diaspora. And without any further ado, I will turn it over to Dr. Tanksley.
Thank you, Clarence. And it's so good to see you. You didn't mention that we were both in a fellowship program together.
I was trying to be all fancy.
That's how we know each other. And I learned a lot from Clarence. So, I mean, it's great to be here, y'all. All right, let me get my slides. Oops, I always do share instead of slideshow. All right, can y'all see these? Okay. So my talk for today is titled No Human Detected, Educational Inequity and Digital Discipline Under the New Jim Code. So just kind of pulling on some of these threads, I got No Human Detected, right? It's a play on no humans involved, right? NHI, which is the term that police use to discuss, right, when they killed Black folks who were deemed unhuman, right? Whether that was folks who they deemed thugs, unhoused people, sex workers, things like that. And I connect this work to how technologies are similarly rooted in this idea of Black people as being not subhuman, right, unhuman. And then I also draw attention to Dr. Ruha Benjamin's work, The New Jim Code, really thinking about how technologies and AI in particular have actually exacerbated the tendrils of the carceral apparatus. So I'm looking at these phenomenon in schools. So I always like to start my talks by like positioning my work and paying respect to the scholars who taught me. So this is Dr. Safiya Noble, author of Algorithms of Oppression. I was her very first graduate student, and so a lot of my work is just informed, you know, by hers. I mean, truly, most often when I give a talk, somebody is like, have you heard of Safiya Noble's work? And I'm like, oh, this is why. This is why it sounds like that, right? Because she taught me everything I know. And I just really think it's important to cite Black women. And so that's why I do this every time, because it's so easy to forget who actually like started a lot of this work, right? So my research has these kind of three different strands. My dissertation research has started my strand on social media and everyday digital technologies. This is the work that really examined how social media technologies, particularly content moderation systems, proliferate images of Black people dead and dying, right? That so many people thought that the images of George Floyd or Philando Castile, right, et cetera, the reason they went viral was because people were clicking on them, when in fact, it's because the content moderation systems are designed to send them viral, right? They're designed to prime clickbait, and Black death has always been super profitable, right? So that was that line of work. I also look at STEM technologies and learning technologies in schools. So these are things like, Canvas or Scratch or code.org, right? These technologies that are in schools to like advance STEM. We're seeing AI be really prominent in this area. And the picture here is of a student named Ahmed this is a viral story, I'm sure you're familiar. He brought a disassembled clock to school to show his science teacher and he was arrested, right? And then this final image is from March 2020, the beginning of the pandemic, where another viral news story came out and said that a young Black girl was sent to prison because she failed to do her remote homework, right? So this area of my research is really looking at ed tech and AI, right? And how it's tied to the carceral system pretty explicitly. So that last area of research is really what I'm going to be delving into today, thinking about algorithmic bias or algorithmic anti-Blackness and ed tech. So ed tech is like the shorthand way of saying educational technologies. But when I think about bias, I'm really thinking about how anti-Black racial logics become encoded into socio-technical infrastructures. So things like data, code, algorithms, machine learning decision trees, image recognition systems, et cetera, in ways that create disparate and dehumanizing experiences for Black students, both on and offline. So when we say educational technologies, there is a range. There are so many technologies in our schools currently, many of which we have no idea, right? You find out years later that your niece and nephew and your kids were exposed to these technologies, right? So some of the ones we're familiar with are the learning technologies that I just mentioned, right? They're there like code.org and Scratch, and they are, a way to augment learning or make learning more engaging or relevant. There's also school safety technologies, right? So this is things like content moderation software built into school devices that keeps you from accessing inappropriate content, right? This is also Ring cameras. It can be the metal detectors when you're coming into school, right? We have Gen AI and chatbots. This has been, the hottest trend ever since November 2022 when ChatGPT was released. So we have now all kinds of models of ChatGPT, right? Claude and Bing and whoever else. And we also have school districts designing their own chatbots using the same GPT databases, right? There are also predictive analytics. These systems are there to help educators identify students who are at risk of failing. So this is supposed to be like an early warning system where you can see a student is struggling in the class, be proactive, give them the support they need, and make sure that they don't actually get pushed out of school. And I have to move my little box so I can see this last one, classroom management. This one is the tools that help teachers make sure that the kids are on task, basically. So things like Classroom Dojo is like the most popular one, right? And an example is on a lot of these apps, teachers can, if the students are all on their own devices, the teacher can actually see the students' screens, right? And close out tabs if the tabs are off task, if they're trying to play a game, right? They're gamified oftentimes. So if you're on task and you're doing, what you're supposed to do, you can get some extra points, right? So these technologies are often implemented in our schools via these myths about technology and AI in general. And there are many myths that are currently pervading, schools, but I just pulled 4 that are relevant to today's talk. So the first is that technology is inherently neutral and its results are objective, trustworthy, and valid. Because technology is neutral, it can be trusted to make unbiased decisions. And most importantly, and most prevalently, right, these tools make decisions better than humans can and better than educators can, right? This is why AI and EdTech are positioned as the silver bullet needed to remediate inequity in general and education inequity in particular, right? This is the whole thing about AI. It's going to fix longstanding issues of educational inequity by leveling the playing field, right? For those who are most marginalized. And then finally, racist outcomes in AI are harmless. They are one-off glitches, or they're unavoidable or unforeseeable mistakes. And this is also why we see all of these headlines about how AI is going to transform education and revolutionize education, right? We had similar conversations when the web came out. We had similar conversations when the calculator came out, right? Everything was supposed to end educational inequity, and yet it's still pretty pervasive, right? So I want to just kind of walk through some of the technologies that are, quote, revolutionizing education, which really force us to ask, what type of future, revolutionary future, is this offering Black students, right? So the first example is anti-cheating software. These are systems like Proctorio, or HonorLock or ProctorU, that are increasingly used to keep students from cheating on exams in real time. Now, many of these systems use a range of artificial intelligence technologies. One of the first systems that students come in contact with is the facial detection system. So the image on the left is actually a student attempting to log into her exam using the facial detection, right? Unfortunately, AI is horrific when it comes to identifying Black faces, and it is the worst at identifying Black women's faces. So because these bias technologies are the very first thing that students encounter in the test, many Black students are disproportionately locked out of their exam because the software cannot actually see them as human. And the most disturbing part of this for me was going to the website and actually seeing the rhetoric said, our sophisticated, AI systems can determine the difference between a human and a lifeless object, right? And yet it could not recognize Black faces, essentially rendering Black folks, right, as unhuman, lifeless objects. If you make it past that particular feature, there are a host of other issues that you might come in contact with. So there is a feature that determines if your Wi-Fi is too unstable. If you have unstable Wi-Fi, you're flagged for cheating, right? If you are moving your eyes too much off screen or just too much in general, you are considered cheating. You also have to turn the camera to see your entire room for them to make sure that there's no other people in the room. This inherently disadvantages folks who do not have a room all to themselves to take an exam. Actually, a study came out during COVID and said that most students of color were actually accessing their tests and their homeschool curriculum via public Wi-Fi, right? Libraries and McDonald's and things like that. So all of these students would be locked out of their exams. There's also noise issues, right? If somebody talks in the distance, the system identifies you as cheating. So there's a range of reasons why you can be identified as cheating that are clearly anti-Black, classist, ableist, etc. Now, the consequences of this are often you fail the exam, right? You're rendered as a cheater, which then has disciplinary actions, right? A lot of students are getting punished in various ways. Either they fail the course, they are suspended, expelled, etc. Some of the learning technologies, even though they're positioned as, they're going to provide a better education, the real question is a better education for who? Because a host of these technologies spew misleading, historically inaccurate, and anti-Black information about Black communities, right? I put an example here of Harriet Tubman AI, right? It's an AI system that pretends to be, that dons the personality, I guess, of Harriet Tubman and is going to teach you about Harriet Tubman. And yet when students were trying to use this, Harriet Tubman was quoting Kanye West. Harriet Tubman was saying critical race theory does not align with, Black radical principles. Reparations are inherently racist, all kinds of things, right? These are the technologies that are supposed to make learning more culturally relevant. This is also a breakdown of ChatGPT, which we know so many of these AI technologies are rooted in eugenic science. It's not a secret at all. And actually, if you just ask the right question, it will show you that, right? So in this prompt, they ask ChatGPT to make a table of human brains based on their worth and their race. And here we have the breakdown where white brains are worth $5,000 and a Pacific Islander brain is worth $1,000, right? There's endless examples of this. And I also want to identify that folks will often push back here and say, okay, well, learning technologies might be biased in the social sciences, but we can still use them for STEM, except LLMs are terrible at doing math, right? And math is the bottleneck for students of color who are interested in STEM pathways. So they're just terrible all around, I would argue. Also, a study just came out a couple weeks ago that revealed that teachers are more likely to use learning technologies for discipline. They're more likely to use them for discipline than they are to use them for learning. Now, we are not talking about than using the school safety technologies, right? The discipline technologies. That's a totally different study. This is technology that is only supposed to be used for learning, and a majority of teachers are using them for the sole purpose of discipline, right? Unsurprisingly, multiple studies have come out and shown that teachers are more likely to identify Black students as cheaters and punish Black students for using AI. And what's important there is that we don't have any evidence to suggest Black students are cheating. Actually, the study showed that Black students are not cheating, right, at these ridiculously high rates as other students. But they're also being punished when they use AI the way that they were told to use AI, right? So it's one thing to punish somebody for cheating and they were cheating, right? It's a whole other thing when they're using it for accommodations, disability accommodations, and they're still being punished, right? So we're in this like bind right now of, it's a lose-lose situation, I think, in a lot of cases for Black students. Predictive analytics they've gone through a lot of audits recently, and researchers have consistently found that Black students are over-identified as future problems and future dropouts, right? If you are identified in September as a future dropout and a future behavioral problem, you are likely going to encounter, right, people who have deficit understandings of you, people who have lower expectations of you, and most likely going to be stopped by school law enforcement, right, school police. We know self-fulfilling prophecies are a thing. And that is, in fact, what these studies found, that by the end of the year, many of these students were pushed out, even though their grades increased or stayed the same, right? Content moderation systems. These are in something like 80 to 90% of schools, according to Center for Democracy and Technology. So these content moderation systems flag African-American vernacular English as inappropriate, right? So if you are using AAVE, you are often flagged as, dangerous or toxic, right? Content related to Black identity, Black culture, Black history is flagged, right? And you can see on this, on the left-hand side, this is actually a screenshot from my student who tried to access Black history content in real time, a 9th grade student, and got the, this is blocked content notification. A study came out actually about one of the most popular platforms, Gaggle, which was actually, it had in its banned words was any words related to queer identity. So queer students were being disproportionately targeted by these systems. Now, again, these biases have all kinds of harms, right? A, you're not able to access content that's relevant to your identity or even relevant perhaps to your schoolwork if you're doing a history assignment. B, you might get in trouble, right? Because the principal or your teacher is seeing that you're accessing inappropriate content. But what most people don't know is that these systems are directly connected to law enforcement, right? So these flags are not just going to your principal, they're going to the local police. And because these are school devices that students take home with them, right? This content moderation happens 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you are home and you type in, what is Juneteenth? And you get this notification, that goes to the police, who then come to your door after school hours, right? So we can see how that is incredibly intrusive and dangerous, especially since low-income students and Black and brown students are the students who are most likely to have school devices, right? Because of socioeconomic inequities. And this is also disturbing. I mean, for so many reasons, it's disturbing. But we know Black students are actually 6 times more likely to die at the hands of police than other students, right? So increasing their contact with the carceral system because of an algorithmic bias, right, is dangerous, to say the least. And if you're interested, the study that actually did like a full audit of this one database to see what terms were blocked, you're probably not going to be surprised by the blocks, but like it was literally I am a Black man was an example of content that was blocked and considered inappropriate or dangerous. I like to share this app about predictive policing because I'm located in Los Angeles. The schools that I work in are surrounded by LAPD. Los Angeles Unified is not only the second largest school district that serves predominantly Black and brown students, right? But it also has the largest police force, its own police force, one of the largest in the country, right? And the surrounding, in addition to having that school police force, we also have LAPD, which uses predictive policing, right? This is an app that determines which areas are deserving of more surveillance, right? Where are there going to be crime hotspots? Future crime, right? Where is future crime supposed to happen? Researchers did an audit of this database because the AI system developed a gang database, right? And they found that actually 87% of the people on this gang database were Black and brown folks, and that many of the people on this list were babies under the age of 1, right? So AI has already predicted Black and brown babies to be future gang members, right? And to be surveilled. And then finally, because I always get somebody who says, okay, well, when they scale these models, they're going to become better, right? And actually, that is the opposite. So ChatGPT 4.0, which launched in March of this year, which is the database or the model that most of our schools are using, actually is incredibly dangerous for Black folks. So first of all, even though the explicit racism, like the image I showed you about the eugenics chart, the explicit racism decreased, but the implicit racism skyrocketed. So they actually found out that if the AI system could detect that you were Black from things like AAVE, right, or sentence structure or semantics or references or things like that, that the system would be more likely to recommend you for a lower paying job, for a harsher sentence, but most terrifyingly, it was more likely to recommend you for the death penalty, right? These are the systems being used for automated sentencing. So our young people are navigating schools, right, that are already connecting the technologies to the police, and then they are encountering these other carceral technologies, right, where an AI sentencing system may be then used to sentence them to death. And I want to also highlight this study that was done by Otis Johnson, who's at, oh my God, John Hopkins, I believe. And his study was about high surveillance schools, right? So some of these results are, I think, unsurprising, right? That schools that have more surveillance technologies place more students on the discipline track, right? Regardless of if there's more crime, regardless of if there's more behavioral disparities, they just simply discipline more students, right? We know that there are socio-emotional consequences of being in high discipline schools, right? Feeling stressed, feeling worried, having test-taking anxiety. And there's also academic underachievement. If you're constantly being pushed out of classrooms, if you're constantly dealing with low expectations or microaggressions, right? That your math scores or your achievement scores are fairly low. Now, this study also found that these effects are school-wide. So does not matter if you are the student who is disciplined. It only matters if you're in that school. You are less likely to be a high achiever in math, right? And they did this for like many schools across various states. So this is really an educational equity issue on so many levels. So I have argued throughout my work that the proliferation of digital and artificial intelligence technologies into education has actually made schools less safe for Black youth, exacerbating the school to prison pipeline via the new Jim Code. So that's where we are, right, in schools. And in the last half of my talk, I just kind of want to showcase how I've attempted to support Black students who navigate these schools. This idea of preparing Black students to, quote, do more than survive comes from abolitionist educator Dr. Bettina Love, right, who says that schools for Black students are often these exhaustion factories, right, and that they spend their entire time just simply trying to survive, right, and that liberation is about doing more than surviving, right, that we actually deserve to thrive, we deserve to live, we deserve to, right, have joy, etc. So one of the ways that I'm engaging in this is I developed a summer program that I will show you in a couple slides. My summer program is informed by many concepts and frameworks, but I want to pull on 2 for today. This idea about hacking, right? Dr. Ruha Benjamin talks about hacking in this way that I just love. She says, to hack a system, one needs an in-depth understanding of how it works, its strengths and its weaknesses, and a vision of how to make it better, to make it do something it wasn't meant to do, right? So what does it mean to actually understand these systems, reimagine, redesign, repurpose them? She also defines abolition as this duality, right? That calls for abolition are never simply about bringing a harmful system to an end, but also envisioning new one. And this idea comes from the etymology of the word abolition, right? Whose, the two words are abolere, which means to destroy, and olere, which means to grow, right? So what do we do after we destroy these anti-Black death-making systems? What does the world look like after that, right? We have to dream that up. And that's actually a part of the liberation process, right? So this is my summer program. We actually just finished the 4th cohort. It's at UCLA. It's with Black students who are 16 and 17 years old. And in the center, this is Dr. Ruha Benjamin, who popped in and saw us. And the students presented their critical technology products. So I'm going to take you through very briefly some of the lessons that we discuss in this 5-week program. The goal, again, being to raise their critical consciousness around the types of AI technologies that are in their schools, how they work, right, and how we can design them differently. So this is like kind of a landscape, I think, of how critical literacies should be, right? They should include user and experiential knowledge, historical and communal knowledge, algorithmic and computational knowledge, and then socio-political and environmental knowledge. So just going to quickly go through some examples. So I tell students in this class an algorithm is a set of instructions designed to solve a problem. And then we talk about W.E.B. Du Bois' question, how does it feel to be a problem, right? And that the problem of the 21st century is the Negro problem. So if Black life is consistently the problem that these systems are designed to solve, then in that case, anti-Blackness is an algorithm, right? Anti-Blackness is a set of instructions or racial logics designed to solve the problem of Black life. And so then using that as kind of like our point of entry, we write out algorithms using if-then statements to talk about the types of racial logics that constrict and constrain their experiences in real life, right? So these are some examples of algorithms that the students came up with. So one student says, if a Black child gets too loud in class, then they deserve to be disciplined. And another student says, if you do not present as your biological sex, then you are forced to conform by your teachers and your peers. So you can see how there are logics, right, that then create these material inequities for students, whether it's being disciplined, right, whether it's being shamed, etc. We also talk about robots. We brought a robot in class. And we talked about the history of robots, right? So they are seeing all these little serve bots. Literally, these are called serve bots, right? On campus, zipping around on campus. And somebody happened to notice that a lot of the serve bots had people of color names on them, right? So we had a little history about where robots come from. Well, the etymology of the word robota, means slave, right? And actually, the very first robot that premiered in the US at a science experiment was this robot, Rostus, the mechanical Negro, Rostus, the mechanical slave, and Rostus, the mechanical robot, right? So you can see directly how the idea of the robot is inherently about the Black body yoked and harnessed, right? We also talk about the material realities of the internet and AI, right? So the internet, this is an image on the left of the subsea cables that actually hold the internet data, right? And the image on the right is of the Middle Passage. And so we talk about what are the similarities between these two maps and why are those the similarities, right? And where do you have access to Wi-Fi? Because overwhelmingly Wi-Fi exists in the global north and not in the global south, right? And the people who install these subsea cables from colonized lands over, right, to the imperial core are people of color, and it's a very dangerous job, and they often die putting these subsea cables in, right? And then don't even have access to Wi-Fi. We also talk about the human labor, right, that's behind these technologies. I just saw a quote recently that said, there is nothing artificial right, about artificial intelligence. And actually, it's all human, it's all material. So these are the examples of the human labor behind AI. So this was an article that came out maybe like 2 years ago now. But OpenAI, which is ChatGPT's company, they use Kenyan workers, and they pay them less than $2 an hour to make ChatGPT less toxic. The image in the middle is a study or an article that came out that showed that prison labor is used to train AI systems, right? There's so many examples. It's like, the Elon Musk's Tesla showcase that just happened a couple days ago. The robot was actually somebody in a robot costume, right? The Amazon walkout stores that are supposed to be AI, they're supposed to be so smart that when you walk in, there's no cashiers, right? You pick what you want and then you leave, then you get a receipt later, right, for the purchase. Actually, it was a lot of workers in the global south, right, just tracking people on a camera, typing up the receipts and sending it. So most of this is racialized labor, right? And then I like to share this image on the far right because this is an indigenous woman who is doing an intricate beading. And actually, indigenous women designed the microchip, the layout of the microchip. And they were hired, quote unquote, back in the day by companies like IBM or Microsoft to actually put together microchips. But you never hear about this type of history, right? In the similar way that you don't hear about Black women being the first computers. There's also environmental damages, right? We know that ChatGPT uses a ton of water, that data centers have high energy emissions, and that AI is exacerbating the climate crisis in horrific ways. I mean, we're having droughts because of AI usage, right? So I think the study said that a single conversation with ChatGPT is the same as drinking like a bottle of water, something like that. And unsurprisingly, these data centers are most likely in Black and Brown communities, right? So we carry a disproportionate burden when it comes to like climate disasters. So this is important. I feel like a lot of folks don't know the environmental harms of these things. And so then what we do is we start looking at case studies, right? So this is an example of an image recognition system that identified this young man's friend as a gorilla, right? And he tests it out because he's like, is this a glitch? How is this possible? So he uploads the image multiple times and it continues to identify his friend as a gorilla. This was like a viral like Twitter conversation that happened many years ago that actually was a type of debugging, right? Now, mind you, Google never fixed this. To this day, you can look this up. They just simply made it impossible to search images of gorillas rather than actually fix this. So we talk about this, and then we do our own kind of like Google search result research. So I have just like some stock images here. So like this would be an example for if you search up 3 white teenagers and if you search up 3 Black teenagers, right? So we're seeing some disparity. So students look up all kinds of terms: unprofessional, professional, right? Professional is always white folks. Unprofessional is always Black folks. They'll look up pretty versus ugly. They'll look up doctor versus nurse. And they're seeing all kinds of race, gendered, classed differences in the results, right? We talk about why. Then we use technologies to recode the data. So in this Teachable Machines software, the students can actually insert their own pictures for data. So like for class 1, they might redo professional. So that professional has images of folks of color with natural hairstyles. And then they'll retrain unprofessional to be people who are like sleeping at their desk or, who are eating really like messily or things like that. So this is an example of a student recoding. These were images that came up for unprofessional hair, and the students recoded it in their project as professional hair. You train the model, and it'll actually showcase these types of results, right, instead. And then finally, we study abolitionist technologies that are designed by and for our communities and that seek to advance justice. So one quick example is Abolition, which is a crowdsourcing app that rounds up your spare change and donates it to folks who are unable to pay their bail simply because they are impoverished, right? That's one of many examples of how do we actually rethink about these technologies. Rongo is also an app that is completely owned by indigenous folks, right? So actually they have data sovereignty. And so like we explore that as like another way to think about AI differently. Okay, at the very end, I'm gonna show you a couple youth projects. or they are reimagining this. So this is a project where the problems the students are trying to solve is related to like racism in education. So the students say, in schools, Black youth are forced to conform to white standards in order to survive and succeed. They also experience microaggressions from teachers and peers. Because of this pressure to conform, some Black youth may miss out on community cultural knowledge and an understanding of their true history. This is a significant issue because the school system is negatively affecting the mental and physical health of Black youth. Poverty causes a lack of access to healthcare, which makes it more difficult for Black kids to get resources. So you can see how they're thinking at the intersections of all of these systems, right? And so they actually came up with their own robot named Jordan that was designed to address racialized microaggressions and teach Black history rooted in critical theories of race, gender, sexuality, etc. So we won't go too in depth, but essentially they learned that microaggressions shorten your telomeres, right? Leading to a shortened life, which is one of the many reasons why Black folks die prematurely, right? Because of anti-Black racism. And they simultaneously learned that microaffirmations actually are protective factors, right? And they can actually save your telomeres from shortening. And so these are things like doing the head nod to other Black folks, right? Actually making other Black folks legible in public spaces. This is giving compliments. There's all kinds of things, right? And so they designed this AI agent that could do that essentially. Teacher moderation app. The students again have concerns about their teachers being problematic. Many of them, the schools that they attend, their teachers are predominantly white women from very different socioeconomic classes, right? And that anti-Blackness is an issue that they confront constantly. So these students say, teachers often discriminate against students without facing repercussions. Their teacher moderation system will allow students to voice their experience, build the strength to call out discrimination, and realize that they deserve equity in classrooms. Meaningful decision-making in the context of children's own lives will fortify their confidence in facing real-world responsibilities. So you can see how they are thinking about AI in ways that are designed to disrupt racism, right? And then for time purposes, I'm going to show you the last one, which was like a really interesting conversation. Okay, so the students open up with a discussion about fitting the description and police stops, right? And they are recognizing that policing is anti-Black. They give us the history of policing and slave patrols. They talk about the current connections between technology design and prison labor, right? And then they say, here's our technology to disrupt this. We are going to make the police wear these AI glasses called blinders, right? And it essentially makes them colorblind. Well, the class did not feel that this was actually an ethical technology. So this had a really rich conversation where students were essentially like, why do we need to put money into the carceral system? They don't need any more technologies. They got body cams, right? And all they do is turn it off. Actually, how about maybe it's actually not possible to make an ethical technology for an inherently unethical system, right? What if we actually put technology or money into other community resources? So that was a really important conversation because the students were like, that's actually, I never even thought about that, right? And then there were other students who were like, I don't even want to use AI. I don't have all the time in the world. I wish I could show you all the different things the kids made, but essentially really pushing us to think differently about AI, and even if we need it to begin with, right? So that's all.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Tanksley, for that. And we've got about 15 minutes for questions. I'd really love to hear from people in the audience. I know that Dr. Tanksley touched on a lot of issues and topics that people have been working on in our fellowship group. Would love to hear y'all's thoughts and questions. Do you want to just raise your hand, Dr. Tanksley? Do you want to just call on people as they raise their hand? Okay.
Sure. Lush?
Hi, this is Lush. I work with Abolitionist Teaching Network, and we have been we've been like double dutching around being like, we know AI is a huge thing to get into. We don't even know where to start. We feel like we got to figure out what AI is even before we're figuring out. So I'm just curious if you can offer like some I like took furious notes here, but any specific resources that could like guide us into it when it just feels so daunting for us to even figure out like what our inroad is, and knowing like this is a dangerous technology, we're abolitionists, we need to like deepen our understanding of AI, but we're just like,
Yes.
we can start.
Yes. Okay. So I believe it's the DARE. You might be familiar with DARE, DAIR. Organization has a page of like resources, and they're like really like entry level discussions about the various types of AI and how bias becomes embedded. That's one thing. Two, Dr. Roderick Crooks is here, I see, who just published a phenomenal book that I'm like in the middle of right now about ed tech and how deeply problematic it is. I feel like that's a great, I know a book is, sometimes it's hard to read a whole book, but literally just like skimming certain sections, like I think there's a lot of information there. It's called Access is Kept. Okay, because I love a book. I'm just saying, not everybody got a full time, for a book, but Access is Captured. Get that. I mean, I feel like it's perfect to like just get into what are educational technologies, how is AI involved, because we often think about AI as just chatbots and not the like, courseware that's in schools, right? And I feel like there was one other thing I was thinking about, but I'm drawing a blank. I hope those two are okay though.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yes, Christina?
Christiana, I heard you say that like the coding in Scratch and Canva were being used. Could you just like, I go to school and I use all those things, and I don't know how, can you just explain to me what they do with data? Because I didn't know that those websites were also being used. Like my school's like one of those, like my school does a lot of bad things, but like they do a lot less in terms of like web filtering and things like that, because they
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so Scratch is not necessarily, it doesn't have like a surveillance feature in it. So things like Classroom Dojo, and there's so many apps that I can't even think of the names, but they're like apps that are like math games. Actually, whenever there is like you have a login as a student, like the teacher often has all kinds of other features, right? Like seeing, like in Canvas, for example, right? Your faculty member or your teacher has access to when you logged in, how long you logged in, how long it took you to take a test, whether it was a browser, like which browser it was, your IP, like so much information. And they often use that to determine if you cheated or not, right? Without ever telling you. So if I go in and I see that you completed this assignment in 2 minutes, I'm going to assume you cheated. When really you could have just done the assignment outside of Canvas, logged in and uploaded it, right? So like that's an example. There was another one I was just gonna say. Also, a lot of the my example for Scratch is very specific. So in a study I did, the students who were using Scratch at the time, I always gotta say this because Scratch people be in the audience, they be getting real mad. At the time of the study, it didn't have a diverse representation of skin color, right? And so the Black girls in this study weren't able to use the sprites or the avatars to represent themselves. So what they did was upload pictures from Google or of themselves to Scratch in order to like make their Scratch story. Now that all worked, but what we ended up finding out was that the Black students' projects consistently crashed and all the data was lost, and it just happened over and over and over again, and we really could not figure out why they failed the assignment. Come to find out at the time, again, Scratch did not have like a data infrastructure that allowed for students to have that much external data in the actual project. And so it would crash because it just couldn't hold all of these external images, right? It's set up to use like the avatars. So that's kind of like one example where because something like a discriminatory design, right? Because the avatars weren't designed to be diverse, students had to do this extra labor that then you have like these back end issues.
Oh, wait. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Keisha?
Thank you. I think just following up on what Christiana was asking, what's the opt-out for students or families, right? Because we often hear like it's more of an opt-in or requirement, right? So then what would be opt-out if there's not yet protections or barriers from what we're talking about?
I think that is the current conversation. In the Center for Democracy and Technology study that came out, there's a 2023 and a 2024. And it's basically the same questions and they're trying to see the difference. They found that parents overwhelmingly are not told what technologies are used. So that's one of the first things. It's like even getting an inventory of what technologies are launched is, I think, a really important step. And then vetting those technologies, right? Because I don't know if parents would approve of Proctorio if they knew that it was directly connected to law enforcement and it was taking people's, IDs and scanning the room and all kinds of things, right? So that is, I think, what we're currently trying to navigate. I don't know if Dr. Crooks knows of examples of where folks have advocated successfully. I only know of folks who find out kind of afterwards and like individually push back. But this is still like new. I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for that. Chinella?
Yes, hi. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Sorry, I was listening to everything. I'm just getting off work. But I want to say thank you for such a great presentation. Like, well, a lot of things you were just saying, I was like, whoa, like I knew that happened, but like, and what you were saying about, it was earlier in the presentation, I think. So I just graduated from college and we used a lot of like lockdown browser and stuff like that.
Mhm.
It actually just reminded me of when I was during the pandemic, I was taking a test, but I broke my glasses and my glasses were not, I have really bad eyesight, but we're using lockdown browser for the first time. And like anytime my eyes went closer to the screen, so my face would go out the screen and they'd be like, oh, you're being flagged for cheating. My professor ended up emailing me. He's like, hey, like, I saw your message before, you're all good. But it's just like, if he didn't see my message before about breaking my glasses, I would have just been flagged for cheating. So yeah, that just reminded me about that. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's such a problem. I think there's like so much, it just makes learning so much more challenging. It's like we already have all of these barriers. We're already navigating teachers who have low expectations, right? And now on top of test taking anxiety and microaggressions, like you have to then prove that the technology is faulty, which a lot of people do not believe that technology is faulty, right? Yeah, it's very frustrating.
I also see a question in the chat here where it says, do you know of Native scholars doing similar research and work for Native or Latinx people?
So there is a scholar who does work in computer science, Frida, and then her last name starts with an M. I feel like it's like Mick something. I always have a hard time remembering whenever I'm on camera. But I do know Frida does a lot of work in computer science. A lot of the folks I know are doing work in computer science. There's also Ian Her Many Horses, who does work on indigenous computing practices and like pushing back on like problematic computing principles. And okay, I think we might have also. I'm glad that Dr. Crooks is here. Like we have some other examples. Let's see. I feel like I just see my lit review right now because I do know I'm just like drawing blanks. Ezekiel Dixon Roman does some work. He's Afro-Latino. Yes, okay, I'm drawing some blanks. But yes, there are folks who are doing this work. I think it's once you find one person's article, what I normally do is I look at their citations and then I go from there. One of the things that I search up is like algoritmo is like one of the keywords I think to get to some of this work because it's like the Spanish version of algorithm is what I'm told. Jeremy.
Yeah, sorry if this is kind of a big question, but I'm kind of wondering what your academic like bridge into this work was, just because I'm thinking of like where I am right now as a teacher and like, you know, seeing these technologies around me and, you know, getting from where I am to like kind of like where you are. Do you have any suggestions or advice or anything?
Oh God, suggestions. Ooh, I'm like academia. Me and academia are like not friends right now. I will say how I like got into this work is it's a very confusing. I don't think I realized it as it was happening, but I took these slides out because I didn't have enough time. But what I'll say is that I grew up in neighborhoods where it was very clear that the relationship that Black folks were supposed to have with technology was one of like coercion and containment, right? It's like our communities are divided by like the railroad tracks, right? That there's a very heavy carceral footprint. Our schools have barbed wires, right? The junkyards are predominantly in Black and brown communities. Here in Inglewood, there's like the oil rigs, right? So there's just, it's very clear that these technologies like are meant to keep us in and to like watch us and surveil us and to like extract power, right? And empower other communities. And that really like Black Death was like this central organizing feature. And I talk about how like my grandmother, who's from the rural South, sharecropper, right, did the Great Migration up north to work on a factory line. And she worked for Bosch and Lomb at the time. And the technologies that she was working with on the line, they were like basically like a rudimentary laser. It was just like massive technology, or like I don't even know how to describe it, like an apparatus that would cut the glass. And my grandmother had to put her hand in really quickly and set the glass up and then move her hand out. And she would see people like lose limbs all the time and die on this line because it was so dangerous. And her boss was just like, if you're not willing to die, like get out, right? Because this is life-saving technology. Some people have to die. And then later, her daughter, my aunt, ended up, she was a sex worker and she struggled with drug addiction, and her partner had abused her, and he ended up blinding her. And so when she was in the hospital, we found out that the lineage of those technologies, that eye technology, right, the lasers that would then be used to like fix her cornea, she actually wasn't eligible for those technologies because she didn't have insurance and because she was a sex worker, right? And because her pimp called the police on her, she was also put straight into jail after they did a rudimentary fix of her eye, right? And so all of this for me was this understanding of technology being like what they told us technology was supposed to be for was not actually accessible. Like this techno future where everything was going to be equitable was actually never available to Black folks. So like that kind of, and I was a teacher as well. So all these things kind of came together of like education, racial justice, abolition, and technology. And I landed at UCLA where Safia happened to be there, and she took me in because nobody knew what to do with me. And the rest is history.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I think we have run out of time, unfortunately, but I know that we'll be having many more interesting discussions based on everything you presented to us today, Dr. Tanksley. So thank you so much for coming. I will say our next speaker event is going to be on November 7th. It's going to be with Khadija Abdurrahman, who I'll drop a link to in the chat as well. Another fantastic thinker, organizer, doer. So please join us for that. We will definitely keep the conversation going, and yeah, hope to see you next time. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
All right, nice to see everybody.
You too. Thanks for coming.